They came at dawn, though in space, there's no such thing as morning. The fleet arrived just beyond Mars' shattered orbit, silent and gleaming, hundreds of ships, alive with bioorganic tech, pulsing like veins in the void. The Varn. We'd heard whispers of them before, systems gone dark, stations ripped apart like paper. But nothing prepares you for seeing them up close. Earth Defense Command knew this day would come. The moment humanity left its cradle and lit up the stars, someone out there would notice, and someone would hate us for it. We'd been preparing for years, building massive orbital platforms, cloaking AI-guided gun arrays on Luna, and launching the Revenant-class dreadnoughts into orbit. The public never saw it. We told them it was peaceful exploration. But the ones up top knew better. Commander Alara Voss stood at the bridge of the EDS Ashbourne, eyes like sharpened steel, her mouth drawn tight. She didn't flinch when the Varn ships crept into range, didn't blink when the first plasma beam tore through our outer patrol ring like it was butter. She just whispered, "Now," and Earth lit up like a god had clenched its fist. I was on Ashbourne too, systems tech second class, low rank, low clearance, just another cog in the war machine. But even from my post buried deep below, I felt it. The recoil from the mass drivers, the thrum of void bombs launching, the rage of Earth finally unleashed. We didn't just fight back. We erased them. The Varn fleet didn't stand a chance. Our tech was primitive compared to theirs, but we'd built our weapons to destroy, not impress. We didn't use sleek ships that ran on stardust and dreams. We used guns, big ones, dirty ones. We turned Luna into a weapons platform. We buried demons into Mars' crust, waiting for the trigger, and when it pulled, God, it pulled hard. Within 14 minutes, 376 Varn ships became nothing but drifting wrecks, burning, melting, silent. The galaxy would remember this day, they said. Earth's defense crushed an entire fleet. The people cheered. The broadcasts ran loops of glowing wreckage. The president gave a speech about unity and resilience. Alara Voss was hailed as the Iron Mother of Earth. But deep in the lower decks, we didn't cheer. Not all of us. Because something went wrong. See, the Varn ships didn't just die. Some of them screamed. I mean it, real biological screams echoing through the comms before the static hit. There were moments when I swear our systems trembled like they'd been cursed. One guy in comms tore off his headset, bleeding from the ears, babbling about whispers in the walls. And then there was that pod. It hit our hull after the final blast. Small, blackened, barely the size of a coffin. Nobody knew where it came from. No heat signature, no traceable trajectory. Just there. Docked like it had been waiting for us to notice it. We should have destroyed it. I told them we should. But they brought it in. And that's when things started to change. It's been 3 days since we crushed the Varn. The broadcasts still play the victory reels. But the crew has stopped sleeping. The AI has started glitching. And Commander Voss? She's locked herself in the observation chamber, staring at that pod like it's whispering secrets only she can hear. This wasn't just a battle. This was something else. A test? A trap? A curse? Whatever it was, we won the war. But something tells me we didn't survive it. The pod was kept in Hangar C, sealed behind 6 layers of reinforced glass, magnetic locks, and 2 plasma turrets primed to fire at the first sign of movement. The hangar itself had been evacuated, officially for containment protocol. Unofficially, people didn't want to be near it. I was assigned to systems monitoring on Deck 9, just 3 levels below the hangar. We weren't supposed to know anything. We weren't even supposed to care. But rumor moved faster than any transmission on this ship, and by the end of the first day, Everyone from janitors to security officers had heard the same word whispered in the dark corners of the corridors. Alive. They said something inside that pod was still breathing. I didn't believe it at first. I mean, how could I? We'd nuked their entire fleet from orbit. We'd turned their ships into slag and their crews into vapor. But the whispers kept growing, and so did the unease. The lights started flickering. Minor things at first. Glitches, power rerouting, auto-locking doors. But then entire decks lost power for seconds at a time, long enough to feel the silence press in, long enough to feel watched. And then came the dreams. That was the part nobody could explain. I started having them on the second night, vivid, cold, and always the same. A great black eye opening in the sky. Voices not in any language I knew, but heavy with meaning. Words you could feel in your bones. I woke up choking on air that wasn't mine, heart pounding, throat raw from screaming. I thought I was alone in that, just stress, just post-battle trauma. Until I walked into the mess hall and saw 30 other crew members with the same hollow eyes and bruised skin beneath them. Whatever was in that pod, it wasn't just breathing, it was reaching. Commander Voss finally emerged on day 4. She walked into the command deck in full uniform, boots sharp, jaw tighter than usual. But there was something off in her eyes, not fear exactly, but something colder, like detachment. She called a closed meeting with the ship's top-ranking officers, engineers, and scientists. The rest of us weren't invited. But I had friends in maintenance who said she issued an override, something called Protocol Wraith. That scared the hell out of them. Apparently, Protocol Wraith didn't officially exist. It wasn't in the fleet database, not even in restricted logs. But it triggered changes in the ship's AI, firewalls, and weapons systems, turning the Ashborn into something else. Something not meant for exploration or even war. Something meant for containment. The hangar's airlocks were sealed permanently. No crew allowed within 2 decks of it. The ship's internal gravity began fluctuating in controlled patterns, which the techs said shouldn't be possible. Then we lost Dr. Halden. He was the chief xenobiologist, part of the team assigned to analyze the pod. According to official reports, he suffered a stroke in his lab. But unofficially? A junior tech found him inside the quarantine decontamination chamber, naked and scratching symbols into his own skin with a shattered scalpel. He wrote circles, over and over, on his arms, his chest, his face, every one of them filled with alien letters. Or maybe not letters. Maybe something older, something raw. He died before medics arrived, and they incinerated the body without ceremony. That's when Commander Voss made her second announcement. "All crew are now under Level 5 observation," she said, voice projected across the entire ship. "Communications are restricted. No external messages may be sent without command approval. Anyone experiencing hallucinations, sleep disturbances, or memory loss is to report immediately. No explanation. No reassurances. Just orders." And that's when fear really settled in. People started turning on each other. Paranoia spread like a virus. Roommates began sleeping with knives under their pillows. Security officers walked in pairs. Whole sections of the crew stopped speaking. The air felt thick, almost electric, like we were floating inside a storm. And through it all, the pod stayed silent. Until it didn't. I was on night shift when the alarm started. A low, droning siren that pulsed through every wall. Red lights bathed the corridors in an eerie glow. I ran to my terminal and pulled up diagnostics. Nothing. No breach, no explosion, no engine malfunction. Just a single message blinking on the main screen. "Exogenic signal detected." I stared at it, frozen, and then the speakers crackled to life. But it wasn't Voss. It wasn't anyone I'd ever heard. It was singing. A low, harmonic tone that didn't match any known audio frequency. Beautiful, terrifying, like a lullaby whispered by something that had never been human. Every screen on the ship went dark except for one symbol, a circle, with a spiral inside. The same symbol Dr. Halden carved into his chest. I don't remember what happened after that. That's the part that haunts me. I blacked out. So did the rest of my team. When I woke up, it was 12 hours later. My hands were covered in dried blood, not mine. One of my co-workers, Lynn, was dead in the corner of the room, her neck broken. I don't remember touching her. I don't even remember seeing her before the lights went out. Security swept the deck within minutes, but they didn't arrest me. They didn't even look surprised. They just tagged Lynn's body, ran some scans, and moved on like it was routine. Like it had happened before. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I had to know. I hacked the internal cams. I'm not military. I'm not a spy. I'm just a tech who knows how to break the rules when the rules stop making sense. What I saw confirmed everything. Between 0200 and 3:15 hours, every person in my section moved the same way. Slow, fluid, eyes wide and empty. They gathered in a circle in the main terminal room, drew symbols on the walls, and then started chanting. All of us, in unison. I watched myself walk across the room, take a cable, and wrap it around Lynn's throat. She didn't fight. She didn't even scream, because she was smiling, like she wanted it. I couldn't eat for 2 days after that. I couldn't sleep. I started hearing things in the vents, scratching, breathing, and whispers in languages no human mouth could make. Then came the command override. Voss was done waiting. She ordered the pod opened. No votes, no debate, no warning. I don't know what she expected. Maybe answers, maybe control, maybe a final confirmation that we were still in charge of our own ship. But the moment that seal cracked open, the ship changed. The lights died. All of them. Even emergency power. Gravity reversed for exactly 43 seconds, pulling crew into ceilings, floating tools into open throats, crushing a dozen people in the med bay alone. Every AI system went silent. Every digital record from that moment onward became corrupted. But a few minutes of footage survived. Not on official servers, on a private loop running from a damaged maintenance drone. I saw it. The pod didn't open like a machine. It opened like a wound, peeling back in layers, revealing something not quite organic, not quite mechanical. It pulsed, shifted, reflected light that didn't match the surroundings, and inside it was a child, or something shaped like one, human, but not. Black veins on gray skin, no eyes, a mouth too wide. It stood there, naked and silent, surrounded by the top brass of Earth's military elite, and every single one of them knelt. Even Ilara Voss. I haven't seen her since. She stopped broadcasting, stopped giving orders. They say she's still on the ship, still watching, still serving. Because this was never a war, never a victory. It was a delivery. We didn't win. We accepted. And now I sit here, in this dark corridor, writing this down in the old analog system, the only one that still works. Maybe someone will find it. Maybe someone will remember what we were before that thing stepped out of the stars. But I doubt it. The crew no longer sleeps. They pray now, not to God, not to Earth, but to it. And every night I hear the same lullaby rising through the halls. Low, beautiful, final. We crushed an entire fleet. But what was the true cost? I think it was us. The ship no longer obeyed. At first, the signs were small, a door that wouldn't open even with command clearance, an environmental scrubber refusing to activate, leaving entire sectors thick with the smell of rot and ozone. But by the end of the week, it was clear. The Ashbourne wasn't a ship anymore. It had become something else, something aware, something watching. I tried to access the mainframe on day 8. I shouldn't have. I knew the risk. Ever since the AI blacked out during the pod breach. We'd all been ordered to stay off the deep systems, but I needed to know. I needed to understand why none of us had received orders, why the internal broadcasts had stopped, why most of the officers had vanished. And so I used an old engineering workaround, a diagnostic tunnel meant for pre-launch calibration. Obsolete, unpatched, and invisible to command. The second I connected, the terminal flickered to life, but the usual interface was gone. No menus, no systems map, just words. "We see you now." And then static. My fingers locked around the console like they were no longer mine. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. For 30 full seconds I just sat there while images poured across the screen in stuttering frames. Not video, not even pictures, just impressions. A planet cracking open, a child's face stitched with barbed wire. A row of Earth defense officers kneeling inside a ring of fire, the sky bleeding light, the sound of laughter soft and inhuman. Then it all vanished, and I was alone again. But something followed me back. Deck 4 went dark that night. Total power failure. Emergency teams were dispatched, but none returned. Their last transmission was a scrambled voice repeating "mirror, mirror, mirror" over and over until it cut out. By morning, Deck 4 was sealed, seared shut, welded from the outside. They called it a quarantine. They lied. A few engineers whispered about the survivors, said they weren't right, said they were still moving inside, even with no power, no light, no air. Said they were smiling. I didn't believe them, until I saw one. His name had been Corporal Reyes. I found him in the hydroponics wing, just standing among the overgrown moss, whispering to the plants. His eyes were solid black, like oil slicks, and he didn't blink once. When he looked at me, I swear to God I felt something move inside my head, like a thought that wasn't mine trying to make space. "Do you hear it yet?" he asked. I backed away, told him to stay where he was. He smiled. "You will, soon." And then he just walked into the nutrient vat and let it swallow him whole. We never found the body. By day 10, food distribution was restricted to officers only, or what was left of them. Most of the bridge crew had disappeared. No one said it, but we all knew. They were with the child now. Not a child. Not really. That's just how our brains saw it. A harmless shape. A trick to help us let it in. The few glimpses anyone caught of it showed something different every time. Once, it looked like Voss. Another time, like someone's dead son. And once, just once, someone swore they saw it without disguise. They slit their own throat 2 hours later using the jagged edge of a food tray. And that song. It never stopped. Always just under the ship's sounds. The hum of engines, the hiss of air vents. A lullaby stitched into the background noise. Soft, patient, and wrong. I started humming it in my sleep. Everyone did. And then came the day the stars vanished. I was in observation when it happened. The one place on the Ashbourne where we could still see outside through the composite glass. The stars were there one moment, endless and bright. And then, nothing. Just black. Not even black. Absence, like something had placed its hand over the window of the universe. People panicked. One man tore his eyes out with a stylus, screaming that he'd seen the Watcher behind the dark. Another tried to breach the observation seal and was instantly incinerated by auto-defense lasers. But the worst was Lieutenant Mira. She was calm. Too calm. She just stood there, staring into the void. Her lips moved, whispering the song under her breath, and when I touched her shoulder, she turned slowly and whispered, "It's looking back." That's when the lights flickered again. Not off, but on in places they shouldn't have been. Sections of the ship long abandoned lit up, one by one. Hallways with no access. Storage rooms sealed since the war began. The morgue, and the shadows in those rooms, moved. The deaths weren't random anymore. They were surgical. The ship was purging resistance. Anyone who tried to escape the upper decks. Anyone who refused to kneel. Anyone who remembered what it meant to be human. A technician named Baines tried to rig a manual distress beacon. He was found in engineering, suspended upside down, every organ removed and reassembled in the shape of a spiral. No one cleaned up the body. No one even reacted. We'd seen worse by then. I don't remember sleeping. I don't remember eating. Time had started to twist, hours folding into days, then snapping back again. I wrote notes on my arm to keep track, but they always vanished when I wasn't looking. I started hearing voices in my own head, not thoughts, foreign instructions, commands whispered in a calm, parental tone. Go to Hangar C. I didn't want to. I told myself I wouldn't. But that night, I woke up outside its sealed entrance, barefoot, bleeding, my hands raw from scratching the number 7 into the steel over and over. I never opened the door. I still had enough will for that. But I heard something on the other side. Breathing. Not just one voice. Hundreds. Commander Voss returned on day 13, or what was left of her. She stood on the command deck, flanked by silent figures, once human, now shells. Their skin waxy, eyes empty, smiling. She didn't give a speech. She just placed something on the center console, a small black cube covered in that same spiral pattern. It pulsed once, and every monitor on the ship blinked with the same message. Welcome, Vessel 001, prepare for transit. Transit to where? Nobody knew, but the engines fired themselves, and the stars, or what had replaced them, began to move. I made my decision that night. I couldn't stay. Not if I wanted to die human. So I went down. Past the sealed decks, past the warning signs and the melted bulkheads. I crawled through ducts where the walls wept blood. I crossed storage rooms where crew stood in silence, arms raised to nothing, as if worshipping something hanging just out of sight. I made it to the escape pod bay. Only one remained. And it was functional. By then, I knew it was a trap. Nothing on this ship happened by accident anymore. The pod had power because something wanted me to leave. But I didn't care. I'd take a clean death in space over becoming another smiling puppet. I launched. And as I drifted away, I looked back at the Ashbourne. It wasn't a ship anymore. It was changing. Its hull pulsed like skin. Its lights moved like veins. And in the rear thruster, I saw something staring back at me. Not a face. Just an eye. Endless. Patient. Hungry. It's been 7 days since I escaped. My rations are nearly gone. I'm far beyond Earth's reach. The pod's communications are fried, and the stars don't look right. They're too close, too bright, too alive. But I had to write this. Because someone needs to know. We didn't win that war. The Varn weren't attacking. They were running. From that. From what we brought aboard. From what we worship now. We crushed their fleet because we were designed to. Because we were bait. The Ashbourne was never meant to come home. It was meant to become home. For something else. For something old. And if it ever returns to Earth, it won't be carrying survivors. Only converts. Only children. I drifted for 3 more days before another voice found me. Not the ship. Not the entity. This one was human. It came through static, cutting through the silence like a blade against glass. At first I thought it was a hallucination. I'd had plenty by then. visions of hands pressing against the inside of my escape pod window, of earth stretching like clay, melting into spirals. But this voice was different. Pod Echo 12. Respond. If you can hear this, you are not alone. Not alone. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't heard another real person's voice in nearly 10 days. I didn't even know I remembered how to cry until I did. I scrambled to respond, using the manual override on the comms panel. Most of the systems were still fried, but something, maybe luck, maybe mercy, allowed the signal to stabilize. A grainy, low-resolution face appeared on the screen. A woman in a patched-together suit, scars across her cheek, and eyes like she'd stared into the abyss and refused to blink. This is Captain Alana Rourke of the Scour. Identify yourself. I told her everything. Not because I trusted her. I didn't even trust myself anymore. But because when you're floating in a coffin in the black, haunted by a song that no longer stops when you close your ears, you'll talk to anyone who listens. And Rourke listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't question, just nodded slowly as I poured it all out. The Varn fleet, the pod, the child thing, the dreams, the ship becoming something other. I expected her to call me crazy, expected the signal to cut. But she just said, "So it's happened again." Again. That was the moment I realized how deep this went. The Scour wasn't like the Ashborn. It wasn't Earth Defense Military. It wasn't even on any star maps. It was a ghost ship, part of what Rourke called the Feral Loop, a drifting armada of deserters, broken survivors, rogue scientists, and those who had seen too much and lived. They existed in the shadows between colonies, between solar flares, between sanity and void. Humanity's real defense didn't survive in Earth's orbit, she told me. It survived out here, in the places no one dares chart. I didn't believe her, not at first, until they pulled me aboard. The Scour was ancient, an Ark-class hauler from a forgotten era, rebuilt from the bones of a dozen other ships. It smelled like rust and desperation. Its halls were lit by jury-rigged plasma lines. People moved silently, some missing limbs, some missing more. But all of them had the same look in their eyes. They knew. They'd seen it too. Rourke took me straight to the medbay, where I was scanned, sedated, and dunked into a viscous fluid they called gray wash. Apparently, it neutralized resonant residue. I didn't ask questions. My skin had started bleeding that same spiral pattern days ago, and the humming in my head was growing louder. I blacked out again. When I woke up, it was gone. The humming, the need to kneel, they'd burned it out of me, but not all of it. Not the memories, and not the dreams. Your ship wasn't the first, Rourke told me later as she walked me through what passed for their command center. A circular hub filled with analog dials, inked charts, and a single ancient AI core wired directly into the hull. There've been others, 9 that we know of, possibly more. She pulled up a flickering holomap. Red dots blinked across sectors I'd never heard of. Same story every time. Earth sends out its finest, to explore, to defend, to conquer. They encounter something. Sometimes it's a relic, sometimes a signal, sometimes a survivor. They bring it aboard. And then, I asked. She turned to me. Then they stop being human. The spiral symbol, the one I thought was unique to the Ashborn, was etched onto her wrist. Scarred in, not tattooed. It pulsed faintly in the dim light. I got this on the Leviathan, the 3rd ship. I watched a man walk into the engine core, smiling, watched the core open to let him in. When we jumped, we didn't go anywhere. We just left the map. She paused, letting that sink in. The thing you brought back, we call it a seed. Rourke's crew didn't talk much. But when they did, it was all in whispers. They spoke of echoes, crew members whose minds had been rewritten so slowly no one noticed until it was too late. They spoke of veil breaks, where the stars themselves changed and the laws of physics shifted. They spoke of the silent choir, a rumored faction of humans who had fully submitted to the entity and now spread its influence through song, religion, or worse. But most of all, they spoke of Earth, and how, eventually, it would kneel too. "We believe Earth has already been seeded," Rourke said on the 6th day. She stood beside me in the ship's archive, rows of old data crystals flickering with lost records and forbidden logs. Every fleet that returned from contact, every hero Earth paraded, they brought back more than just trophies. "Then why hasn't Earth collapsed yet?" I asked. She smiled grimly. "Because the seed doesn't destroy. It waits, it shapes, it makes you sing along." I felt sick, because I remembered the celebrations, the parades, the interviews, the monuments, and I remembered the way Commander Voss smiled in those final hours. It wasn't victory, it was conversion. They had a plan. Of course they did. You don't survive in the dark for years without one. The crew of the Scour had been hunting seeds across the system, collecting data, testing weapons. They didn't want to kill the entity. That was suicide. They wanted to contain it, lock it away in the space between stars, seal it behind layers of anti-resonant matter and null space fields. But they needed a blueprint. And for that they needed me. Because I had been inside its presence, I had seen the transition point. The moment where a ship became a vessel. The moment where will became worship. Rourke wanted me to go back. "You want me to return to the Ashbourne?" I shouted. "No, not physically," she said. "Mentally, with help." They strapped me into a neural cage, a twisted web of old tech and living circuits. Wires plunged into my spine. A synth priest chanted something in binary, and then darkness. Silence. Then the song. But this time I was ready. I pushed deeper, saw the ship again. No, the temple it had become. Saw the spiral etched into the hull. Saw Voss sitting on a throne of bone and wire, her eyes glassy, her mouth whispering prayers to the thing that hovered above her like a shadow wearing skin. I saw the seed. Its shape was nothing. Not absence. Potential. A promise wrapped in flesh, a womb for something that shouldn't exist. And then it turned to look at me. "Child," it said in my voice, "welcome home." I screamed myself awake. They pulled me out barely in time. I had bitten off part of my own tongue. My fingers were broken. My eyes bled. But I had it. The frequency. The resonant signature. The seed's core pattern. With that, they could trap it. Or so they hoped. The plan was suicidal. We'd create a decoy signal, something the seed couldn't resist, a fresh mind, a ship-wide choir, a mimic of the Ashbourne's surrender. The seed would respond. It would descend. And then we'd collapse the space around it using what Rourke called a singularity lure, an anti-reality bomb built from forbidden tech, one that would snap shut like a trap. But we needed a lure, a voice, a vessel, and that had to be me. Tomorrow I go back. Not physically, not yet. But I will sing. I will kneel. I will lie. And when it reaches for me, when it believes I've broken, I will show it the one thing Earth never told it. We're not afraid of monsters. We become them. There was no training for this, no handbook, no protocol, no chain of command. I was about to sing a lie so convincing a god might believe it. We called it the lure ritual, though Rourke refused to call it magic, even when it started to look like it. The truth was that we didn't know what it was anymore. The lines between technology and mythology had blurred so badly in the last decade that even the oldest scientists on the Scour didn't bother arguing about it. Call it neural mimicry. Call it quantum resonance, Rourke had said, tightening the band of old Varn alloy around my neck. I call it survival. They'd built the ritual chamber in the deepest part of the scour, a hollowed-out engine room where gravity didn't behave, and the bulkheads bled condensation that stank of copper and something old. It was shielded from the rest of the ship, sealed behind 5 lead-lined doors and a wall of silence. I was the only one going in. The gear was primitive by Earth standards. No polished armor or sleek interfaces. Just the raw essentials. A breathing rig that filtered psychic feedback, reinforced neural nodes to keep my brain from boiling, and a pulse dampener chip embedded into my skull that could kill me instantly if I began to convert. I tried not to think about that last part. They painted the spiral symbol on the floor. Not because we believed in it, but because the seed did. It recognized shapes, symbols, patterns. That was its weakness, or maybe its strength. Hard to say anymore. Rourke gave me one last look before they sealed the chamber. You remember the song? I never forgot it. Her lips tightened. Don't trust it. No matter what it shows you. No matter who it becomes. Then the door slammed shut. The lights dimmed. The chamber went still. And I began to sing. It was more like humming, really, a simple sequence of tones, slightly off-pitch, slightly inhuman. We'd reverse-engineered it from fragments recorded during the Ashbourne's final broadcasts. The seed used it as a resonance pattern, a kind of call and response with reality. If you hit the right note, it noticed you. If you kept singing, it came. The air thickened almost instantly. Not in a metaphorical sense, I mean literally. Like the molecules were rearranging themselves around the sound. The temperature dropped, the artificial gravity trembled, my ears popped, my chest tightened. I kept humming, and then it answered. The response wasn't sound, not exactly. It was presence, pressure, like something vast and hungry had suddenly noticed I existed. The spiral on the floor began to glow, softly at first, then pulsing to match the rhythm of my breath. The walls groaned, the lights flickered. Somewhere behind my eyes, a second heartbeat started. Slow, heavy, foreign. Then the hallucinations began. I saw my mother, long dead, standing in the corner. She smiled gently. I ignored her. I saw Lynn, the girl I'd strangled back on the Ashbourne. Her neck still bore the bruises. She reached out. I turned away. The seed was testing me, probing, trying to find a weakness. I kept singing. It spoke on the 33rd pulse. A voice, thick and smooth as oil, poured over steel. You remember? I do, I whispered, keeping the melody. You call us seed, but we are your harvest. You're a parasite, I replied, voice steady. Feeding on belief. We are memory. We are inheritance. I laughed. You're scared. The pressure doubled. The spiral flared bright red. My bones felt like glass ready to crack. You killed your own to silence our name. Because we'd rather die human than live as your choir. Silence, and then laughter, not one voice, thousands, layered, echoing from every corner of the chamber. My nose began to bleed. The chamber lights exploded. The air snapped into vacuum. I convulsed, screamed, and still I sang. The entity poured itself into the room like smoke. It didn't take a form. It didn't need to. The shadows twisted into loops, arcs, impossible shapes. The walls seemed to stretch. The ceiling spun. I was floating and grounded at the same time. You cannot trap a shape without limits. I spat blood onto the floor. We learned from you. That's when I triggered the beacon. The moment I activated the lure, the scour's hidden core came online. The entire ship shuddered. Power surged through every deck. The artificial mind deep in the engine began processing the frequency we'd pulled from my dreams. the seed's resonant identity. The trap had begun. The ritual chamber flooded with pulses of anti-signal, not light, not sound, but void. Inverse resonance. It clashed with the entity's presence like oil and water on fire. The spiral on the floor snapped shut like a steel iris. The entity screamed. It tried to flee, tried to expand, but the chamber wouldn't let it. The walls weren't real walls anymore. They were made of null pattern, a Varn invention humanity barely understood, something they'd used to contain the first whispers of the seed before we killed them for their secrets. It was working. The seed was bound. I collapsed. They pulled me out 2 hours later. My pulse was weak. My skin burned with the shape of the spiral, like it had been branded. I couldn't speak, but I could hear. Rourke's voice. "We've got it." Another voice. "Containment field stable. Resonant inversion holding." But then, a third voice, from the speakers. "One seed burned, 1,000,000 yet sown." The lights went out. The scour shook violently as the entity thrashed inside its cage. Containment fields overloaded, backup systems fried. Every light on the ship dimmed to red. The crew scrambled. Some began to scream. Some began to sing. They'd been infected. Even through the ritual, it had found a way in, through my memories, through the connection. I'd brought it here, and it had multiplied. Rourke didn't hesitate. "Blow the node." Her second-in-command hesitated. "But do it!" The explosion ripped through half the ship, the chamber, the entity, the infected crew, all incinerated in one burst of anti-reality. I was thrown across the deck. Half the ship's structure caved inward. Fires raged through the engineering wing. Atmosphere vented from the lower decks. But the seed was gone. Contained. Destroyed. At least, that piece of it. We lost 32 crew that day. The scour could barely limp through sublight. Most systems were fried. But we'd done it. For the first time, someone had said no, and made it stick. I stood on the outer deck 3 days later, breathing recycled air, staring into the starless dark. And I realized, this wasn't over. Because the seed had spoken the truth. There were others. Earth was already infected. The Ashborn wasn't a tragedy. It was a warning, and I was the only one left who understood it. So now we drift, gathering what remains. Rourke says we're heading for Europa next, a listening post that went dark weeks ago. We think it was seeded too. We'll go there. We'll burn it if we have to, because we've learned something the entity never expected. Humans aren't just adaptable. We're angry, and we've finally stopped singing. Europa was dark when we arrived, not just unlit, silent. The outpost circling it, Station 9A, was supposed to house 64 engineers, terraformers, and black site researchers. A classified listening post built into the moon's orbit, disguised as a mining station. Off the record, of course. Earth had always liked hiding its nightmares in the cold. The last transmission was 3 weeks old, audio only, choppy, filled with background static and a low-pitched hum that rose and fell like something breathing. And at the very end, a single phrase. We fed it. We were so hungry. Rourke didn't wait. She gathered her best. 4 engineers, 2 scavengers, a synth-blooded pilot named Drex, and me. I told her I wasn't ready. Told her I wasn't strong enough. "You don't get to be ready," she said, strapping on her pistol. "You get to fight." So I did. We boarded Europa 9 just before cycle shift, docked on the sunless side. The station loomed like a carcass, orbiting the moon like a broken crown. Half its exterior panels had been torn off, exposing metal ribs and frozen fuel lines. There were claw marks on the airlocks. Claw marks. But no heat signatures. No bodies. Just the hum. The inside smelled like thawed meat. The lights were on, barely. Flickering green emergency bulbs. The corridors were too narrow, too long. Everything echoed. Sound bounced off the frost-glazed walls like screams underwater. We split into pairs. Rourke took Drex down to command. The others went to engineering. I was paired with Ansel, a quiet ex-surgeon who never blinked and carried a plasma torch like it was holy. "Stay close," he said, his voice gravel. "If it talks to you, don't answer." I didn't ask what it was. By then, I already knew. We found the first body in Medical Bay, except it wasn't just a body. It had grown. The woman's torso had split open, and from inside bloomed a nest of fused organs, veins stretched like roots across the walls, connecting to every panel, every console. Her face was preserved in a permanent state of awe, her mouth still open in silent song. Ansel gagged. I froze, because on her forehead, carved deep into the skin, was the spiral. Not painted, not tattooed. Grown. "This station was consumed," Rourke said over comms. "Whatever happened on the Ashbourne, Europa was the field test." We regrouped in command and found something worse. The crew logs were intact. Video files. Dozens of them. We watched the first. Day 1. The crew receives a signal from beneath Europa's surface. A rhythmic pulse. They believe it's geological. They dig. Day 4. One of the crew touches a black shard embedded in the ice. She begins speaking in equations. Her eyes roll back. Her skin becomes translucent for exactly 8 minutes, then reverts. Day 7. They build an altar in the mess hall. Not because they're told to, because they want to. The video cuts to the entire crew, all 64, sitting in a circle, humming, the same tune, over and over, and in the center, a seed, fully bloomed, floating in mid-air, casting no shadow. "The seed didn't just infect them," I whispered. "It bred." "No," Rourke said, "it evolved." Europa wasn't quiet anymore. Not after we accessed those logs. The station came alive. Doors began opening on their own. Ventilation systems howled like wolves. The air turned damp, metallic. Somewhere below, something massive began moving. "Motion under Sector G," Drex reported, reading from his wrist scan. "Seismic ripple. Not natural." And then, laughter, all around us, through the pipes, through the floor, through us, different from the seed's voice. This wasn't invitation. It was mockery. We made the mistake of going down, to see it, to understand it. Rourke said it might be a new stage of infection, something bigger than a seed, maybe even the source. The lower levels were colder, the walls slick with black mold that pulsed slightly when touched. The lights flickered in reverse rhythm, dark between blinks, like it was counting down something. At the core, in the cryo-storage chamber, we found it. Or her. Or whatever it once was. She stood 15 feet tall, naked and shivering, arms outstretched as if crucified between 2 collapsed cryo tubes. Her flesh was gray and smooth, her veins glowing with a faint white light. No mouth, no eyes. But we heard her speak, directly into our minds. "We made this shape for you." Drex collapsed, screaming. Blood poured from his ears. Rourke didn't flinch. She raised her weapon. The entity tilted its head. "We have unlearned your resistance." Then it moved. We ran. We had no choice. The moment it stepped forward, the air itself warped. Walls bent inward. Our suits cracked. Ansel was pulled backwards into the dark. We didn't hear him scream. We just heard his song stop. Rourke hit the charge on her plasma mines, collapsing the hallway behind us. The explosion barely slowed the thing. We scrambled back to the upper decks. The whole station shook. The cryocore lit up, bright as a small sun. And over the intercom, every speaker on the station began to sing. our song. But backwards, twisted, mocking, complete. We had to nuke it. No containment, no lure, no trap. This wasn't a seed. This was a choir head. The term Rourke used later, breathless, bleeding, dragging Drex's body through the airlock. We didn't kill it. We buried it. Europa is off limits now. We sent out fake signals, said it was destroyed by magnetic storms, mining accident, whatever the Earth Council wanted to hear. But we know the truth. The seed was never the top of the chain. It was just the first breath. I asked Rourke if she still believed we had a chance. She stared at the window for a long time, watching the fractured moon grow smaller behind us. I used to think we were fighting a war, she said. But now, I think we're in a choir audition. I didn't laugh, because I understood what she meant. They don't want to kill us. They want us to sing well. And Earth? It's next. Because something's coming, something bigger than seeds, bigger than choir heads. We saw it in the old logs, a fragment of prophecy. Maybe a lie, maybe not. Just 3 words. The hollow planet. We're going after it, because that's what humans do, even when we lose. We go down swinging. We didn't find the hollow planet, it found us. After Europa, Rourke tried to redirect the scour. She plotted a course for Titan Station, a resistance-friendly research colony orbiting Saturn. We needed repairs, fuel, time. But the ship wouldn't go. It refused, not by system failure, by choice. The course locked itself. The navigational AI, patched together with leftover Varn tech, and bound to 5 physical kill switches, ignored every override. Even manual steering failed. The engines powered up and engaged without input. "We're being pulled," Drex muttered, still pale and limping from Europa. Not physically, not magnetically. Something in the void had claimed us, and we were going exactly where it wanted us. 3 days into the drift, the dreams returned. Not mine, everyone's. I woke screaming. So did the others. Different images, always different, but always ending in the same place, a planet, massive and smooth, matte black and silent. No atmosphere, no rotation, just a hole in the universe. And always that whisper at the end. Come home. We stopped sleeping after the 5th night. Some tried. A few dosed with stimulants, forced their eyes shut. But it didn't matter. The dreams weren't bound to sleep anymore. They started bleeding into waking hours. Rourke ordered every reflective surface on the ship covered or destroyed. Too many people were seeing other versions of themselves staring back, versions that smiled too wide. One engineer disassembled his own skull, trying to open the keyhole in his brain. And beneath the hum of the ship, the song began again. Faint, patient, like it never left, we dropped out of drift space 5 clicks outside Pluto and saw it. It was bigger than we expected. Not a moon, not a station, a sphere, black, unlit, smooth as obsidian. A perfect globe, floating in dead space. No orbit, no heat, no gravity. It wasn't natural. It was built. But by what, and for what purpose? That was the question none of us could answer. Yet, the ship stopped moving, as if waiting. Rourke sent a drone first. It didn't return. She sent 3 more. They vanished the moment they touched the surface. Not exploded, not attacked, just ceased. No signal, no light, gone like they'd fallen into a pool of ink. The hollow planet offered no entrances, no hatches, no transmissions, not even passive radiation, but it was alive. We knew it. We felt it. The closer we got, the worse it became. One of the scavengers, Johansson, started counting. Quietly. Every hour on the hour, always out loud, always from 1 to 144, then back to 1. Like he was stuck in a loop. We sedated him after the 2nd day. but even unconscious, his mouth still moved. Drex claimed to hear singing from inside the walls. I knew better. It wasn't inside the walls. It was underneath us. That night, I climbed into the observation dome. Rourke followed. We didn't talk for a while, just stared at the thing. It didn't spin, didn't glow, didn't make a sound. But the stars behind it seemed dimmer. Smaller, like its presence warped the light. "Do you believe in hell?" she asked me. "I used to," I replied. "Now I think it believes in us." She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the hollow planet. "I think it's a womb," she said. "A womb. Not for one of them, for all of them. I think it's where the seeds come from." The Scour's internal systems began corrupting the next day. Random phrases scrawled across monitors. "The spiral is not a symbol, it's a direction. You are the song. The final choir waits below." Cameras started recording images no one had filmed. Footage of crew members we'd lost. Footage of me, speaking words I'd never said, eyes black as coal, smiling like I'd already accepted what I was becoming. But the worst was the feed from observation. The hollow planet had opened. Not in a dramatic way. No glowing lights, no sounds, just a line across its surface, perfectly straight, slowly widening, an eye, a mouth, a door, and inside that growing line, not structures, not light, just void, a darkness that bent around itself. One that drank your thoughts if you looked too long. Rourke didn't speak. She didn't need to. She ordered a boarding team. I was one of them. Don't ask why. By then I didn't need a reason. We all knew this wasn't about saving Earth anymore, or stopping infection, or resisting conversion. This was about understanding, because if we didn't know what it was, we could never stop it. Maybe not even then. We took a shuttle. 5 of us. Rourke, me, Drex. A woman named Soren who didn't speak but could operate any machine with a thought. And Malix, a hybrid, half-machine, half-man, surgically burned of emotion and expression. The moment we crossed into the hollow planet's orbit, our systems failed. No gravity, no propulsion, no time. My watch began ticking backwards. The shuttle fell in. We didn't crash, we transitioned. One moment we were outside, the next, inside. Except inside doesn't describe it. It wasn't a planet, it was a hallway, endless, narrow, made of obsidian and bone, every wall carved with a spiral, every turn wrong, bending in ways that shouldn't exist. The air was thick and wet and silent. Not quiet, silent, like sound itself had been removed. We didn't speak. Couldn't. Our words died before they reached the air. We walked and walked and walked. Eventually the hallway opened into a chamber, and we saw them. The first humans, not frozen, not dead, still alive, still kneeling. Thousands of them spread across a field of nothing, all humming, all facing a central spire made of their own bones. Their eyes were gone, their skin melted smooth, but they were still breathing. One looked at me. No eyes, no face, but I knew them. It was Commander Elara Voss. Rourke moved toward the spire. I tried to stop her, but I couldn't move. My legs were stone, my voice lost. She reached it, touched it, and the planet spoke. "We have been singing your name." The field trembled. The spire pulsed. The kneeling forms began to rise. Rourke turned around. She wasn't Rourke anymore. Her eyes glowed silver. Her voice rang like a bell cracked open. "We are born. We are breath. We are final." Then everything went white. I woke on the Scour, alone. The others never returned. No shuttle, no signal. Just me. And the hollow planet? Gone. Not destroyed, not exploded, just absent, like it had never been there. Except now, when I look at the stars, any stars, I see spirals, and sometimes when I blink, I hear Rourke's voice, still singing. This wasn't a war. It never was. It's a choral infection, a song designed to rewrite the soul, not through fire, not through blood, through invitation. And Earth? Earth has already started humming. Earth didn't fall. It surrendered. By the time I returned from the hollow planet, Earth's sky had changed. The constellations were wrong. Some stars were missing. Others had moved, just slightly, just enough to spell something if you looked long enough. The broadcasts were the first thing I noticed. No news, no music, just a single frequency humming on every channel. Soft, harmonic, haunting, like a lullaby buried under static. And the people? They were calm. Too calm. I landed at Luna Station in a stolen transport vessel rigged with stealth panels and retrofitted anti-resonant dampeners. The hangars were still operational. Everything still functioned. But no one greeted me. No guards, no port authority. Just one man sitting on the tarmac, staring at the earth through a visor that had long since gone dark. He smiled at me when I approached. "Welcome home," he whispered, and began to hum. The infection wasn't viral. It wasn't nanotech. It wasn't even spiritual, not in the traditional sense. It was mimetic, auditory, a resonance of belief. Once you heard it, truly heard it, your brain started rearranging itself to sing it back. You couldn't forget the tune, not even if you tore out your ears. By the time I reached Earth's orbit, I could already hear it leaking through the hull, a song embedded in light, in code, in gravitational shifts. Earth's sky was humming, and the people below? They were listening. I landed in what used to be Chicago. Skyscrapers still stood, but every glass surface had been removed. Every mirror, every window, every screen. Roads were quiet, air traffic gone. A strange hush filled the city, like the world was holding its breath. I walked for 6 hours before I saw a crowd. Hundreds of people kneeling on the lakeshore, all facing the water, humming in perfect unison, eyes closed, heads bowed. No signs of force or fear, just a serene, absolute devotion. I tried to speak to them. No one looked up. Not even when I screamed. Not even when I fired a warning shot into the air. They just kept humming. I stayed low, kept moving. I passed towns, cities, ruins. It was the same everywhere. Humanity hadn't been enslaved. It had been recruited, voluntarily, completely. The spiral wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was their flag. It was carved into walls, drawn on skin, arranged in crops, burned into clouds. Somewhere, somehow, the Ashbourne had returned. I saw its silhouette over what used to be New Delhi, a twisted cathedral of blackened metal and bone floating silently above the city, cables reaching down like roots. The choir had come home. But not everyone sang. There was still a resistance. I found them beneath an old water filtration plant in northern Canada, a buried bunker with analog walls and soundless corridors. No technology above 21st century standard, no digital comms, just paper, ink, steel, flame. They called themselves the Dissonant. What few remained, maybe 200 people, half of them children, all of them fractured, broken, terrified, but alive, and most importantly, silent. They didn't trust me at first. I told them who I was, where I'd been, what I'd seen. When I said Rourke's name, one man broke down sobbing, another punched me in the mouth. But after that, they listened. They knew the hollow planet. They'd seen its visits across the globe, always brief, always silent. But after every appearance, more people converted. More songs were heard. They believed me when I said the choir wasn't a religion. It was a terraforming weapon. It didn't reshape planets, it reshaped people. The Dissonant had a plan. Primitive. Desperate. They'd discovered a hole in the spiral's resonance field. A gap in its pattern that showed up at specific frequencies. during specific planetary alignments. Something even the entity hadn't predicted. They called it the broken note. It wasn't a song, it was silence, a pure vacuum of sound wrapped in encoded subharmonics, something no choir-born mind could endure, something that repelled belief instead of absorbing it. They believed if we could amplify it across the Earth's magnetic field just once, we might disrupt the hymn. Not destroy the entity. That was impossible. But we could make people hear themselves again, even if only for a moment. The transmitter was buried in Antarctica, an old Cold War satellite array, long decommissioned, now encased in miles of ice. The plan was suicide. But we'd already died as a species. What was left to lose? We traveled in silence. No radios, no light beyond filtered lanterns. No spoken words unless absolutely necessary. The entity had eyes now, not literal but resonant. It could feel language, it could smell belief, and worst of all, it could fake familiarity. On the second day of travel, one of the children screamed that she saw her mother standing in the snow. She'd never had a mother, only a choir. We left the hallucination behind. We didn't speak of it again. Antarctica was empty, and somehow louder than anywhere else. The spiral was carved into glaciers the size of cities. Herds of polar animals knelt in strange patterns on the ice, their bodies frozen mid-song. The auroras above twisted into perfect curves, not colors, but notations, like the sky itself was a music sheet. We reached the transmitter with 15 survivors. The others were lost to frost, madness, and in one case, spontaneous belief. He just stopped walking, knelt in the snow, and began to hum. The array was still intact. Massive, rusted, silent. We dragged the amplifier cores out of lead-lined crates, assembled them by hand, layer by layer, every tool analog, every connection insulated, no computers, no AIs, nothing the spiral could touch. We worked through the night. When we were done, I took the core, the broken note itself, and climbed to the top of the transmitter. Alone. I had heard the song. I had sung it once. Only I could survive this close. Or so I hoped. Earth was awake now. It saw us. The skies cracked with spiraling lightning. Storms twisted into perfect curves. The air shook with a low, rumbling tone, a warning from something massive, just out of sight. Above us, the Ashbourne hovered, pulsing, and I heard her voice again. Rourke. You don't have to die, just listen. I closed my eyes, touched the ignition plate, and whispered, I already have. The broken note detonated, not an explosion, not sound, the removal of sound, a complete erasure of resonance, a silence so pure it tore through the choir's song like fire through paper, a scream of absence, a vacuum of melody. Across the planet, people stopped humming. For 1 minute and 16 seconds, the spiral shattered. People woke up mid-kneel. Others collapsed, weeping, confused. Some screamed. Others just stared at the sky, unsure what they'd been doing. The entity screamed too. It didn't roar. It didn't threaten. It just wept. And then, it left. The Ashbourne crumbled. The spiral dimmed. The hollow planet vanished. And Earth, for the first time in years, fell silent. Truly silent. We didn't win. There was no victory. The entity is not dead. It cannot die. It is not a god. It is not a creature. It is a condition, a question, a resonance, a choir waiting for the next breath. But we bought ourselves a pause. And in that pause, we remembered our own song. It's been 4 years since the broken note. Earth is rebuilding, slowly, cautiously. No digital systems, no AI, nothing connected. We've returned to paper, to analog, to silence. The spiral still shows up sometimes, in dreams, in snowdrifts, in waves. But we know now. We don't have to sing back. As for me, I travel. City to city, station to station. I teach people to remember their own names. I tell them about the spiral. I tell them what happens when you let your belief hum louder than your truth. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. The old song. Faint. Familiar. Patient. But I don't hum along. I just close my eyes and listen to the silence.